Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Tables with your host, Rob Bradley,
John Charles Ciccarelli,
James Burrows,
and Damien Hallwood.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tales from the Tables, episode 52. We did it!
a whole year's worth of episodes.
A whole year's worth of episodes of the podcast. It took a little bit longer than a year to get there, but
Yeah.
We've done it. 52 episodes.
That's
Incredible.
pretty good going.
It is good going. If you've stuck with us since the beginning, thank you very much and congratulations. We appreciate you very much. If you're new, welcome to Tales from the Tables, a podcast for Rolldark, which is a professional GM for hire agency, rolldark.co.uk. If you're looking for a GM for a long-form, one-shot, in-person or online game of D&D or another tabletop role-playing game, or you want to check out some of the sort of live in-person events we're doing across the year, you can head to that website, you can tailor it to you, and you can play the game of your dreams. I am joined today, and only today, by James. No one else is joining us, unfortunately, on this one. It's just us two today.
It is.
How have you been?
Yes. Good. Yes. Very, very busy with the 9 to 5, but other than that, yeah, lots of personal DMing lately. Now I've got my D&D room sorted, so
Yes.
yeah.
Listeners can't see it, but I can. You sat in it right now. You've got a wonderful sort of forest-like backdrop with a map behind you. Is that Chult?
It is Chult, yes.
Yep.
It is, yes.
Yeah, and beautifully lit by flashing clouds. It looks fantastic. It's the envy of, I'm sure, most of the GMs in our collective circles right now.
Hopefully. No, it's really fun. It's nice to be able to have the space to dedicate to it. But yeah, no, it's proving a lot of fun to DM from, and have all my minis out in a display case type thing, which is just to the side of me as well.
Great. So
no, it's fun. And I was going to say something, and I completely lost track of where we were going. Oh yes, we're sad not to have JC and Rob with us anymore. Although I think going forward, Rob is is struggling to find the time. What with being a new first time parent, so it'll probably just be me, you, and JC. Unfortunately, I think JC's been under the weather lately. Amongst other things, and I think I may have caught whatever he has, but I
From
think
across the ocean.
Yes, yeah, I'm blaming JC despite having not really interacted with him since the last time we did an episode together. But yeah, I've caught something anyway. But we struggle on as I'm a busy day today anyway. So this is actually a nice break from actual work.
Fab. Well, I actually don't know anybody in my life at all, work or personal wise, who hasn't been ill in these last few weeks. I literally can't think of a single person who hasn't had something. It's very much doing the rounds, at least here in the UK, if not beyond. I'm sure with regular flights, it's making its way internationally. So look forward to that very soon, dear listener. If you're overseas, it's winging its way to you right now. You said a lot of personal D&D. All D&D? Any other games you've been playing?
Yes, it has all been D&D. There are so many game systems that I want to break out that I've got the books for. So I've got the June RPG, Call of Cthulhu books. I keep going to my friendly local game store, this place called Athena Games in Norwich, which is great. And I keep seeing all the Delta Green books in there. And I really want to do a Delta Green X-Files-esque campaign at some point. So that's there. And then, I've been looking at 10 Candles again recently.
Yes.
And Dread as well. I really want to do like a horror... clearly, I'm in the mood for a horror game, and it's not even Halloween. So I'm a bit out of sync there. But no, I'm looking forward to doing it. In fact, I don't think you were in the discussion we had the other night about the next Rolldark Fest one that's in Leicester in the courthouses and rooms.
Yep.
And I mentioned maybe doing like a game of 10 candles after the event, like having a lock in with some people, and doing like a 10 candles game because they got the cells in like the dungeon/basement.
That'd be
Which I find would be
incredible.
quite
Incredible.
atmospheric. I suppose it just depends whether they're okay with us having actual candles and fire in there.
Yes, yeah. I can't imagine there'd be too many flammable things kept there, especially for tea lights, small
No,
candles.
I wouldn't have thought so either. I think it depends also as well if what time we're actually getting kicked out. So we'll
Very
see.
true. Very true. I've run 10 candles a few times, and it's run everything from sort of a cool couple of hours to a stretched out 6 hours, just depending on how it goes. So, but it's a great game, and if you can play it in an atmospheric location like that, then my goodness, it'll be something else, transformative. I've played Dread too. I've done a few Halloween games over the years for Dread for some friends. A great game. I highly encourage you, if you're running it, whenever somebody is pulling from the block, to stand up and stand over their shoulder, continuing to narrate the threat that they're currently under while they are trying to pull the block.
Oh, that sounds excellent. Yes, so yeah, that's perfect.
And
Absolutely.
then just either cool it off or obviously see whatever, describe the horror if the tower falls.
Yeah. No, that sounds perfect, actually. Yeah, you want to add that level of jeopardy, because if it's something very basic they're attempting, you don't really need to be all that intimidating. But the more dangerous the situation, the more sort of loud or harsh or intrusive you can make those whispers and narration. Yeah, that does sound very cool. Yeah, it seemed. I do like the Jenga block system. I know it's something that we did at a Rolldark Fest as well, with the big Tower of Doom in the center. But I think just doing a game where that is pretty much the only mechanic, it sounds like it'd be a pretty cool thing to do.
It's genius because it just presupposes tension. You've got a big load of work done for you as a GM, because the players are automatically tense anytime they have to pull one or more. That's another recommendation: one or more blocks from that tower at a time. And that just makes your job that little bit easier, because all you've got to do is then pile on top of it and just ramp it up even further. So it's a brilliant idea to take something that's inherently stressful and turn it into a horror mechanic for an RPG.
Yeah. Yes, it is really good. I do need to try out more systems, because there are so many cool little mechanics like that in systems that aren't D&D that, like I'm sure you could, which one you could steal and put them in your D&D games. But two, I'd make for a great system in its own right, and is relatively simple to implement as well. It's not hard to get like a set of Jenga blocks and play a game, a role playing game around them. So very interesting.
Very cool. My home campaign is coming crashing to an end this year. Very, very close to the end now. They're going to close out at 20th level, and then perhaps move on to the next big bright adventure. So they're all sort of both very excited about, and also sort of a little melancholy about the fact that the campaign's coming to an end. It's going to be in excess of, I think, 5 or 6 years of worth of campaign. So
that's big.
It's a big one.
I think the
big
longest
milestone.
Solid campaign that I've had run is probably my first Rolldark one, and that was 3 years. I've had others come close, or 3 or 4 years maybe even, that have come close. But 6 years, wow, that's a long time.
It is. It's been interrupted by life-related things, such as people in the group, including myself, having children, and for the longest time having to play online, for the longest time having to play only a couple of hours a night as opposed to a full sort of 4 to 6 hour session, has extended the life of it a little bit. But it's going to be very interesting. They have a big old boss villain to fight, which they now know what it is, at least in theory. It is a demon prince. A demon prince of deception, and I'm interested to see if that gets a stat block change in the new monster manual, which I'm sure we'll talk about today.
Yes, that is quite a good segue.
Yes, which I think will be a great segue to the news. So we're trialing something a little bit different for the news starting this week. We'll see how it goes. With it being 2 of us, we might get through a chunk of it, but the idea being, we'll collate all of the news, especially recently, because since the last time we recorded, there has just been so many things. Just the Monster Manual alone, let alone the other stuff on top of that. There's been so many announcements. A huge amount of D&D related announcements outside, over and above the Monster Manual as well. That it's probably going to be easier to just collate all of those together and then take it in turns to pick the story or the article that we most want to talk about, have a bit of a discussion, move on to the next person, and see where we get with it, just to avoid taking too much time out of the podcast for the news, because this week we could cover the whole podcast and then another, I think, just on the news.
Yes, I think we probably could.
So, with that in mind, James, I will hand it over to you to begin with, if you like, and you can take your pick from some of the articles.
Well, okay, yes. Okay. Let's start with one of my favorite things. I've already sort of mentioned my mini collection once this episode, so let's dive into that. They are releasing a whole bunch of minis to coincide with the new Monster Manual. Unfortunately, these are once again, as we'd expect, in those stupid mystery boxes, so you can't pick what you get, which has always frustrated me. But I suppose if you are going and just trying to get as many minis from the new Monster Manual as possible, it's at least the most generic of the sets. So you should go into it hopefully not expecting anything overly specific, and being pleasantly surprised with whatever you get. Unlike some of the adventure-specific ones where you can be trying for a specific NPC or monster and have trouble finding it, which can be much more frustrating. I suppose this is slightly better in that way.
Yeah, agreed. I see what you're saying. With a Monster Manual, like you say, not so bad, but I know that they've done sets for a lot of the core, if not all of the core campaign settings that they've released, and that can be deeply frustrating if you want to have a complete set of miniatures to run that campaign, and you keep getting the one miniature that is a single unique character that doesn't show up more than once in the adventure. That can start getting a bit frustrating, especially when you're putting money down for it.
Well, what I found as well is that a lot of the older adventure specific sets are now incredibly hard to come by and are very expensive when you do. So I've started Tomb of Annihilation for some of my friends, because and thus the map of Chult that I've got behind me. But what I wanted was like the adventure specific models, and luckily you can buy those like in two. I think there's 2 boxes with some like specific NPCs that you can use for the adventure. But that came to, I think one of the boxes is like 50 quid. The next one is like £70, and the quality's good of the minis, I would say, on these, but you can't get the blister packs for that adventure anymore as an official thing, as far as I can see on any website. The Tomb of Annihilation mystery blisters they're not available, and I don't think they're going to get a reprint anytime soon, so that's annoying. And I don't think there's even the Ravenloft ones, and that's a very popular adventure. They're not available to purchase either, or if they were even created. I'm struggling to find whether that was ever a thing, but you'd think it would be, and if it's not, they're really missing a trick. So yeah, I know there's like specific ones where you can get like Strahd and the Denizens of Castle Ravenloft as like a box set of minis, but there's not like generic blister packs for those adventures. And especially for Tomb of Annihilation, there is a lot of very specific for that adventure minis from the jungles, like Giralons, and I'm probably pronouncing that massively incorrectly. But there's a load of there's all the grungs and and stuff like that aren't
Even
aren't
the goblins.
The
goblins are
Batiri,
unique.
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the minis I did get was one of the goblin chiefs, one of the grung chiefs, Chief Yorb. I want to say, and then some other like the big bosses like Raznasai and some of the Red Wizards and things like that. But yeah, There's some of the guides I think are in the other box, and I haven't got that, which because I'm not paying £70 for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. But on a totally non-complainy side, they are actually releasing some minis I am excited about. And I don't believe these will be horrific to get. But they are releasing D&D Icons of the Realms Underdark Expeditions. And these are going to be a glow-in-the-dark set of 44 different minis, which, it says some will have a glow-in-the-dark effect. So I'm hoping that it's most will have a glow in the dark, but that word "some" is giving me a little bit of trepidation. But apparently, will be containing mostly classic D&D creatures like the gelatinous cube, Flumph, Hook Horror, and monsters like the gas spores would have like a glow in the dark effect to them, which would be very cool. And I think it will work very well for in-person games if you can like make sure that your minis are exposed to the right amount of light before the game starts, and you can dim all the lights and have these glow in the dark monsters. I think that will be very cool.
That really would. They get that bioluminescent feel to the Underdark. I imagine it will be any miniatures that make sense to have a glow in the dark feature, rather than like the sort of more characterful individuals than monsters and mushrooms and oozes and stuff. Much more likely to be glow in the dark.
Yeah, like the Hook Horror, I wouldn't expect to, but a gelatinous cube that sort of like faintly glows blue would be very cool.
Yeah, it really would.
I have a gelatinous cube mini, but I'd buy a glow in the dark one.
Yeah, absolutely. You can never have too many gelatinous cubes. No. Put your dice, gelatinous cube dice jails and gelatinous cube paperweight, gelatinous cube miniature, you name it. These are really cool. I've wanted to run Out of the Abyss for quite a while.
So have I.
I would really like to run that adventure. It's a tricky one because it's I was floated for my home campaign as our next one, but after having done Tomb of Annihilation, they were a little tired of big, open, expansive places with no settlements to stop at and meet NPCs, and which there are in both campaigns, but not in the same way as a sort of major city or outlying villages and a place to call home and stuff like that. So we settled on Icewind Dale, having the 10 towns as a nice happy medium because it's a sort of dark horror story.
Yeah.
But with 10 separate civilized areas, albeit some of them quite small, where they can, meet people and sit in a tavern and, just have that stop and rest lifestyle as opposed to just constantly running for your life.
Yes. Yeah, I've not got my players into the jungle yet for Tomb of Annihilation, but I am looking forward to doing that. Yeah, they're still in Port Nine, Zari.
Yeah, lots to do there.
Lots to do.
All right, well, that is very cool. WizKids coming out with... I don't think, at this point, there's no sign of them stopping. We'll have all the dragons for them coming out. I know they're still doing and sponsoring Critical Role. Side note on that, I did read Critical Role coming to an end with its next episode, this campaign. Mm-hmm. Campaign 3 will end, I think it will be episode 121. So we may see very soon. I know they're doing another EXU Unlimited based on the Divergence, if you know the lore, with Brennan Lee Mulligan as GM, which should be great because the Calamity was superb. And after that, it remains to be seen whether they return to D&D. I'm very interested because they now, of course, have Daggerheart out there in the world.
Oh, yeah, of course they do.
And they've been doing Daggerheart games. I really am intrigued to see whether they will continue their partnership with D&D or not.
It will be interesting to see. I mean, there's lots of pros and cons on both sides of it. I can understand them sort of wanting that full control and everything, but D&D has such a large market outside of them that they have access to by partnering with D&D. It's I suppose it's whether they feel they've captured enough of that audience and brought them into and can bring them into Daggerheart without and being able to sort of kick on from there and continue to grow.
Yeah, I think the audience, it's interesting. They have, of course, a massive audience, and I'm sure that a large portion of that audience are there for the personalities over the rule set. And I'm sure there'd be a lot of people in the audience, having said that, that would be intrigued to see them approach the 2024 revisions of the rules and see how Matt handles the combat with all those new bells and whistles. And so, yeah, really interesting sort of pivot point for them. As the time of recording, they may have already announced what they're going to do next. I don't know. But they're the only two pieces I know so far.
Yeah. I'm not massively up to date on the Critical Role side of things. I just don't have the time to sit there and watch them. But like, I did watch like the second season of Critical Role, most of it at least, and yeah, I mean they're all thoroughly talented, and it's great what they're doing for D&D. So I do hope that whatever they decide to do, that like, they continue to go from strength to strength, because they're great ambassadors for like tabletop role playing in general.
They are, and responsible for definitely my resurgence. I'd given up hope on 4th edition, was interested in 5th when it was announced. I had loads of 4th edition books, but just couldn't get a game going, and sort of gave up on it after that. And then 5th edition came along, and then coincidentally, I sort of picked up Critical Role at the back end of their first campaign, and that completely spurred me on to be like, right, I'm buying all the books, I'm finding some people, and we're gonna do it. Which led to my home campaign. So it worked. Thank you, Critical Role.
Yeah, I can't remember whereabouts, like what campaign they were on when I started my first Rolldark campaign, but I think it was probably still the first season. So I did listen to a bit of that, because one of my players turned up to my very first session with a Pumat Soul t-shirt on.
So that would be campaign 2. That would be campaign 2. Yeah.
So I was intrigued by that. Yeah. So it's probably when I started listening. I did go and listen to a bit of campaign 1. I remember the Beholder fight they had. But yeah, no. It'd be interesting to see what they do next.
Absolutely. I've sort of stolen one there that wasn't on the docket, but I thought it was worth bringing up there. I'm happy to let you take another one of these. I think we've got a bit of time to cover a couple more or so.
I suppose, well, I mean, okay. Why don't we get into the big changes of the monster manual stuff, which we may have to go back and forth a bit, because I am not entirely sure what a huge amount of the changes are.
Well, I have been keeping up fairly well abreast of this, so I can filter in a few bits.
The only thing I have heard about is the change to the liches. And the change of the word phylactery, which I don't have a problem with. I know I like it. People have kicked off a little bit about it, and maybe it is an unnecessary change. The only thing I don't like is that what have they changed? Soul jar sounds very boring.
It's nowhere near as cool sounding, is it?
No, phylactery sounds ancient, and but yeah, just anything that didn't sound like your grand keeps jamming it would probably be preferable. Like Soul Shard, or I don't know. That's just off the top of my head. I think that's already better, and I will just use something else in my games going forward for whatever it is.
There's no reason to not continue just using the word phylactery if that's your preference. It's you're not beholden to what it says in the book if you don't want to be.
No, the book always says that. I mean, I've not actually read the small print that's at the start and back of the books so far, but the others have all said, "Well, you're the DM. You do what you like."
Yeah. Well, Liches getting a big buff. Liches are going to be tough fights, as with a lot of monsters. My sort of, I've watched all the videos. The videos officially from D&D and Wizards, they don't go into stats really much. They're mostly just talking about the monsters, and most of the discussions are around changes they've made to origins. Like, for example, goblins now officially being Fae, the Gith, both forms of Gith now officially being aberrations, kobolds officially being dragons. Those sorts of changes. some tidbits on the new monsters, like the ooze of annihilation and the arch hag and the umbral lord vampire.
Yes. So what I am excited for is all the sort of variations and more powerful versions of monsters. So yeah, the vampire. Who are the other ones I saw? I think werewolves are in there weirdly. So weirdly, I know.
Yeah.
I want to say there's variations of gargoyles in there.
I think they've added a variation to most creatures. That seems to be a running theme of these videos is variation, which is great, because that's one thing I loved about the 4th edition monster manual as opposed to the 5th, was that each monster had 4 or 5 variants in most cases, unless it was a unique creature. And then seeing that return is really exciting, and like you say, a mix of levels to allow you to play vampires at sort of 2nd and 3rd level, right the way up to 20 and beyond. And still have a vampire to play with if that's your preference.
Mm-hmm. And and that's sort of exactly what you want as a DM, is to be able to take interesting and cool creatures and have a version of it that you can use whatever level your players are, because you're not always going to be playing at this crazy high level, and you don't want to. And some players. And some games won't last long enough for you to get to a point where you can level up characters to get to that point. And that's just because things like life gets in the way and games get run short. So it's nice to be able to take those things, put them in like small, self-contained stories, and not have to do a load of work as a DM to sort of bend the rules to make them fit, which is what I do like a lot of the time, because I want to have new players. I'll get them to make characters at level 3 when I'm introducing them to D&D, because I think it's a pretty solid level where you get, especially in the 2014 rules, you get your class abilities and stuff kicking at level 3. So
yeah,
it's still pretty simple. It's not too overwhelming, but you get what makes your class special, and you can specialize a little bit more and stuff like that, which is cool. But you also don't want to just throw CR3 monsters at them. And while there are a load of really cool CR3 monsters, sometimes you want something that feels a bit grander for their first adventure. So I want to send them up against a frost giant, and so you've got to like try and balance a frost giant version of that. Or you do want to send them up against a vampire, and that's still a little bit too powerful, so you want like a... Yeah. So yes, I'm very happy that there's multiple versions of stat blocks for creatures. The only problem I have read people complain about is that the fact that because of how many monsters have been packed into this book, which is a great thing, it does mean that the lore segments for the monsters are much shorter than they were in the previous monster manual. And I suppose that's a balancing act that's going to sort of be impossible to please everyone with. Do you want double the amount of monsters, but instead of getting 3 pages of lore on mind flayers, you get 3 paragraphs, which I think is what I heard someone's or read someone say. Yeah, it's frustrating, and I suppose as a new DM, you don't want to... If this is your very first edition of D&D, you don't want to have to go back to the previous monster manual and look up all the lore for the creatures. But I suppose that is an option that I suppose probably most of us DMs for Rolldark who've been doing it a long time, and even DMs who don't work with Rolldark but have been DMing since the previous edition and who do own all the previous books, we can go back and look at our like the previous lore, because I don't believe that they're coming out and saying that much of that has changed. It's just not included in the physical book. So really, it's something that only will properly affect brand new players to D&D with this edition.
I think so. And even then, one thing I've heard them say a few times in several of the different videos, case in point, if you're interested, the videos so far have been an overview of the book, then a video for dragons, one for undead, one for monstrosities, one for aberrations and oozes, one for fae, one for giants, and one for celestials. And in many of them, they've talked about putting tables in the monsters' page, which give different origins for them, how they might have happened. And I think that they're playing hard into letting you really just run with, if you don't want, the deep backstory with the Mind Flayers and the Gith and that whole history, and you have a different thing in mind for your Cthulhu-esque horrors, then you don't need all that lore. And I think on balance, it works better the way they've done it, because you get more content in the book, more variation, more artwork, which would be another big factor to that.
Yes, I have heard the artwork in the book is spectacular.
Yeah, what I've seen is. And to lose a little bit of lore out of that, again, I keep if you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard me harp on this so many times that you'd be rolling your eyes already, because you know what I'm about to say. The best way I've seen it done was the 4th edition Monster Manual, where there was only a few paragraphs, but those paragraphs were separated by DC level needed to learn that information or recall that information.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant way of doing it. It wasn't a huge page of lore, but it gave you just enough to know. And then, like you say, if you've got access to the book, and in the age of the internet, it's very, very easy to just go and find that lore.
Forgotten Realms Wiki is your friend if you really want the lore. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I guess there's an argument for people complaining about it, but I find it hard to get on that bandwagon. I think the way they've done it is probably preferable.
Yeah. And with the art, I've heard as well, they've made sure they've tried to make sure that, and I think we have talked about this in the podcast previously, that they have tried to make it so that the creatures are in their natural habitat. You sort of see them interacting how they would with their environment, and it can sort of give you inspiration as a DM to go and take that and give you an idea on how to use it in the game, which is great. And yeah, some of the artwork for the last edition, I did have issues with. It wasn't as nice. So yeah, no, I'm excited to see it. And it sounds like I think all the creatures have a decent bit of art to go with them, barring some of the stat blocks at the end for generic like animals and things like that. Some of which were included in the player's handbook.
Yeah, I've heard animals have their own chapter now, which which is nice and easy to just locate them for things like druids and and people with familiars and things. It's just a nice central point. It sounds like a lot of monsters are going to be beefy. It's especially high-level monsters have got buffs to AC, buffs to hit points, buffs to damage output. The Archmage apparently is an absolute unit now, with a lot of offensive spells. Yeah. I think something like an AC of 20 with shield. 25 with shield. Yeah, stuff like that. Really great to see these high-level monsters looking like they're gonna kick, and they're gonna kick hard.
The casters especially, I like when you said the Archmage, a caster especially, because it was so easy, the previous version of the Archmage, to just be bludgeoned to death before they did anything in a combat, because their hit point, their AC and HP was very low comparative to their supposed DC.
Casters look to be terrifying in this. I've already talked about Liches getting a buff in that same vein. One thing that they have removed, it seems, I'm hearing early tell of, is anything that has immunity to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. The immunity to that damage is gone, which is great news for martial classes, because it minimizes the number of wasted turns, I suppose. It does mean that werewolves and lycanthropes no longer have that unique feature of only really being able to be damaged by magic and silver, which is a shame.
That is a shame. Yeah, I think that's probably one thing that I won't use. I think werewolves need to be magic or silver specifically, but I do get where they're coming from. Where, especially at lower levels, if something is immune to everything that isn't magic, it's very frustrating for your fighters who their one job is to hit things, and they spend a combat unable to do what they're good at. And I'm sure you can make arguments that they can do other things and grapple and whatnot to try and help the party. But it it is probably more boring for them, and you don't want to restrict, especially at lower levels. At higher levels, I can sort of see you'd expect players to be a bit more experienced, and they know what they're getting in for a bit more, and it's not too big a problem. But for new players, you don't want your first game of D&D to be going up against a creature and you just have to say to one of your players, yeah, you're basically not able to do anything this fight of any use.
Yeah.
So
I've heard they've had a hit point buff to sort of counteract that. So there's more hit points there. So although the martial classes can deal damage, it still will take some punishment to get them down, which is a fair way of doing that. And a lot of, I think, there's a lot of damage. I forget which damage type it is in the moment, but there is a damage type that's being converted to force damage, which will be more deadly against things like barbarians.
okay.
So lots more changes than I was expecting on initial reaction to this book. I am overall very excited for it. We're only a few short weeks away now. Very, very keen to get my hands on it and start running some of these monsters for people and seeing how that all plays with the previous books. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm intrigued as to see if I start putting these into some of these into Chult, if it's going to make it even deadlier than than it was before. If I've got players that aren't building characters using the 2024 rules, so,
I think it will be.
We'll see.
I think it will be.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear.
Yes. I'm gonna, if you'll indulge me, squeeze just one in here. It's not D&D, but it's going to cost me a lot of money. And for anyone, I didn't know about this until I saw it post. I was going to say kickstarted. It was back a kit that it was on. So if you're not aware of it and you're a fan, it seems that the Legacy of Kain is getting a tabletop role-playing game. Legacy of Kain, famed, of course, as a video game franchise that started in the sort of mid to late 90s. It really took off in the late 90s and 99 with Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, even though it did have a game prior to that with Blood Omen. And if you know this franchise, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 1 and 2 were just remastered recently and re-released to a lot of great success. Soul Reaver being the one I think most people recognize. It's Raziel. He's a blue, sort of flensed vampire with a cloak around his mouth, a mop of black hair, white eyes, hooked 3 fingers, and an energy sword kind of wrapped around his arm with these vestigial kind of wings that he uses to glide. Once a vampire, cast down into the underworld and transformed into this soul-eating wraith. The story and the voice acting, especially for the 90s, was incredible. It was written by Amy Hennig of Uncharted fame.
Oh, okay, cool.
So if you don't know the lore of Legacy of Kain and you're a vampire fan, I highly recommend you check it out. And this might just be the best way to do it, because not only is it getting a role-playing game, which is using the Morkborg system. It's not a D&D clone or anything like that. It is using the Morkborg system from the game of the same name. But it also comes with a fairly hefty encyclopedia charting the whole series, its lore, its world building, its main characters with concept art, landscape art, maps, behind-the-scenes interviews, written by Nick Rubin from Rock Paper Shotgun.
Cool.
So it includes that whole tome on top of it, a GM screen, dice, art cards, and things like that. This has got me chomping at the bit. We've talked a lot about desperately wanting a Mass Effect role-playing game. If there was gonna be a role-playing game for a video game franchise that was sort of secondary to Mass Effect for me, this would be in the running. I am playing those remasters right now and loving it. Yeah. I think Raziel is one of the coolest character designs of all time. He just looks amazing.
That does sound cool. I feel like you sort of sold me on the game. I wonder how how it plays now, or where I can play it now, I suppose, is more important.
It's about 20 of our English pounds, or 25, something like that, to get both games remastered. It plays great. I've been playing it, and I played it back in the day, and it still feels pretty good to play. Obviously, it's quite old, but it still feels pretty good to play. And the opening cinematic lives rent free in my head of Raziel showing up in his vampire form with his new wings that he's just got, and Kain, the leader of the vampires, being very jealous of the fact that he's got wings, rips the bones out of them and throws him into a swirling vortex of water for him to burn for eternity, and then land in the underworld, and is revived by a mysterious creature to get revenge. It's awesome.
Okay, yeah, I'm on board.
Yeah, very, very cool. So if you're a fan of Legacy of Kain, be it Blood Omen or Soul Reaver, and you're a fan of tabletop role-playing games, this is a marriage made in heaven. You can still get access to the backer kit now, although it is funded. The early bird prices have already gone, sadly, because I was tempted by that, and they've already gone. It ranges in price in terms of how much you're going to pay, from sort of 40-50 quid for the standard books, all the way up to over £200 for the full special edition collection with everything in it.
Nice. Okay. No, that sounds really cool.
Very cool.
I will have to check that out. I suppose I can segue nicely then into, I think, the last bit of D&D news I want to talk about, which is that they have sort of confirmed that there won't be an adventure book out this year for the new edition of D&D, but there will be in 2026 and 2027, and that they are looking at exploring new settings with those. So no one's really sure what they mean by that, as they've been very, very vague. As they have announced an Eberron book, so it does seem to imply that they have at least one, if not two, like brand new D&D settings, which sort of leads on from the Radiant Citadel, where which is that new city that they introduced in the ethereal plane that's connected to numerous new civilizations and worlds, that was briefly touched on in an anthology, and it wouldn't surprise me if they use that as a jumping off point to sort of introduce new settings.
Yeah,
which would be cool. I mean, it's always a hard sell when people are sort of very set on continuing to play in the Forgotten Realms or the Dragonlance setting, whose name I have forgotten, so I'm going to call it Dragonlance setting, and you can hate me
Kryn,
in the Discord.
isn't it?
Kryn, yes, that's right.
Kryn.
God, I read the books as well, so it's awful. Or like Ravenloft, but yeah. It would be nice to get some new settings and hopefully some that people are interested in. I know a lot of people want Dark Sun to make a comeback, but I mean that's not happening. So yes, yeah. I'd never played Dark Sun, but I would be intrigued to play in a Dark Sun-esque game. But yes, I mean, what's the other game I'm running for some friends? Odyssey of the Dragon Lords. Which I suppose is very similar to Theros, but like if they end up working with third parties, I wonder like what settings they could bring in to the world, and what the thing is I like most about like the D&D adventure books isn't necessarily the story of the adventure themselves. Some of them are very good, and a lot of them need a lot of DM help. And you need to do a lot of the work to make the adventures work. But some of the systems that they bring in for specific areas are good jumping off points for building those sort of things yourself, and that's what I'm enjoying with Tomb of Annihilation. Is all the random jungle stuff, the fevers, having to like track your water, which if that is a system that's built into the adventure and it makes it and is sort of front and center and important, that's very cool. If it's not a system I'd want to use for if they were just traveling around Faerun, going from city to city. I'm not going to be like, tracking the weather and telling them how everything's going. But for Chult and going through this dense jungle, it's a very cool setting, a system. Sorry. So yeah, I hope whatever settings they do bring in have something like that makes it very individual and has a system like that maybe you can, if you want to, extrapolate out into your own settings and use how you'd like. So that's what I'm hoping for. But it seems like it'll be probably not till next year that we find anything out about that.
A new adventure is always great. It's always fun, especially when they tend to have quite interesting villains that then get a big play with a lot of stat blocks and lore and history on them. And usually they're on the front cover of the book, to some people's chagrin, because it's hard to hide who the villain is when they're on the front of the book. But a new that remains to be seen how exciting that is, because it's it'll depend on the sort of theme they go for, whether it's going to be more horror, whether it's going to be more fantasy, whether it's like Wild Beyond the Witchlight being more sort of fairy tale. They tend to have a theme, so it'd be interesting, and a location too. A lot of them tend to focus on a location as well from Forgotten Realms history. Would they be brave enough to do a campaign not set in Forgotten Realms? If they're going to do their own campaign setting, or a new one at least, maybe so.
That's what they seem to imply. It is what they seem to imply. And I'm trying to think what they haven't done in 5th edition, at least. And I suppose maybe a entirely seafaring. I know the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide had some like smaller adventures as part of it, but I don't think there's been a proper like pirate adventure.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool.
So that maybe is something they could do. If they were going to do it its own setting. But I'm sure there's dozens and dozens of potential things that they've not explored in 5th edition. But I would imagine we're probably not going to get anything gothic-y horror, because that's Ravenloft's domain. We probably won't get anything like Chult again, like this jungle Aztec-y sort of hex crawl. Descent into Avernus and sort of into the Abyss. I suppose those are two things that they've explored demons and devils, so that's potentially out. Icewind Dale's a frozen wasteland outside of 10 towns. And it's quite dark and horror-y. So, I mean that sort of environment's maybe out if they're exploring brand. It'll be crazy to see what they actually do with any new settings. I hope that it is it's deep rather than wide, whatever the settings are. I think that's what I'd prefer.
Yeah. Well, that remains to be seen. There's a lot of books coming for revised D&D over the next couple of years, even just the ones we know about. So there's going to be a whole raft of information. Nice to see Eberron coming. I'm not surprised that's the first non-Forgotten Realms book that we're getting. That's a big one. Very, very cool. All right, I think that's probably going to cover us for the news. I said it was stacked, and it is. There's even stuff we're still having to omit to keep this thing rolling. But if you want to check some of these things out, places like EN World or similar websites are a great place to see the latest news on tabletop role-playing games, so check them out. I think in that case, that'll take us to our own tables. And we can tell a few tales from them if you've got any, James.
Yes, I do have one, but but why don't you go first, David?
I can. I'm going to go here first because it's fresh in my mind as it happened last night. It gets a fair amount of mention, but it's just because I'm having a lot of fun with it, and that's Fallout. So Fallout was last night. Players had just completed a main questline mission, which took them under the ground into the sewer systems beneath Old Boston and Diamond City to clear it out for a trade route to be established. And they did that successfully, and they fought a few gribbly monsters along the way and a few wayward souls involved in the main questline as antagonists. I also, when they came out the other side of the sewers, they emerged somewhere they hadn't necessarily expected to, but met up with some Minutemen there, and I introduced them there to Preston Garvey of Fallout 4 fame. The book is canonically set before Fallout 4 that I'm running, the campaign, so none of the horrific stuff that happens to poor Preston before you meet him in Fallout 4 has happened yet, and it was fun to play on that trope as well. But the real chaos of the session came towards the late end of the session, where they decided to make tracks to their next location to sort of pick up their next quest line. And due to a hilarious series of random table results, they ended up with a horrifying encounter that just went from madness to sheer insanity. So it was like watching it was like watching a building slowly be demolished floor by floor as these random tables kept coming up with go to this table, go to that table, go to this table. And it ended on a super mutant arrives riding a Deathclaw and demands all of their caps and food.
Oh dear.
Now, if you know the lore of Fallout 4 at all, a super mutant, not great to come up against, but manageable, especially alone. But a Deathclaw is about as terrifying as it gets. They are these huge reptilian monsters with huge horns on their head that have massive long, unsurprisingly, massive long claws on their fingers that can just open the sides of vehicles like sardine cans and scoop out the innards. They're a horrifying enemy in the game, and likewise in the tabletop role-playing game too. They're a tough ask, especially for the level that the characters are currently at.
Yes, I can imagine.
So they began to panic profusely, and our resident handy unit activated their Mysterious Stranger ability, so it remains to be seen whether the Mysterious Stranger will show up to save the day at any point, because it is a randomly determined thing. But they decided to try and work out whether they could spook the Deathclaw enough to knock the super mutant off of its back and just create a little bit of chaos to give them cover to flee, because they're not ideally wanting to stand and fight against a Deathclaw. So the Mr. Handy robot approached as if to hand over the items that had been requested, and then proceeded to spin around like a Catherine wheel, igniting his flamethrower and making a lot of noise, while the other players fired guns into the air, which was successful at spooking the Deathclaw. It was a series of dice rolls, and it was successful at spooking the Deathclaw, sending it rearing up into the air. The super mutant couldn't save to stay on its back, landed on the dirt, and very quickly the players ran over there with their guns drawn to the forehead of the super mutant and said, "Call it off now, or you're going to be breathing through your forehead." So the super mutant sort of said, "Okay, I'll give this a go, but just FYI, if this goes south, I'm now on your side." And there was a bit of a stalemate in terms of them butting heads about whether or not they would surrender. Basically, getting the same number of successes led to a stalemate, so there was a bit of tension there while the Deathclaw went mad and threw a chunk of rock at the Mr. Handy unit, only for the super mutant to finally yield and attempt to call the beast to heal, and rolled a complication, but was successful. So what that did was he successfully managed to get the creature's attention and call it away from the players. However, it turned on him quick smart and was just about getting ready to tear him limb from limb when it got to the Mr. Handy's turn, who was last in the initiative, and the player had very succinctly said, you basically do what you've got to do because you don't want it to get to my turn. And and it arrived at the Mr. Handy's turn. The Mr. Handy decided that the best course of action would be to get onto the back of the Deathclaw, take up the reins, and try and bring it to heel himself. Which...
How did that go?
Well, this is the cliffhanger of the session, but he was successful insofar as he got on its back and got hold of the reins.
Okay. Well, that's a good cliffhanger.
We now have a beautiful front cover for one of the in-game magazines that you can find in the Fallout universe. They have these wonderful pulp sci-fi magazine covers, and a Mr. Handy on the back of a Deathclaw, reins in hand, trying to bring this thing to bear. That needs to be artwork somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And I
Just-
know for a fact the first turn next session is going to be chaos because it's going to change the landscape again because I know what's
Yeah.
about to happen.
And I'm just imagining it after the Fallout TV series. The Mr. Handy has got Matt Berry's voice, so
The player I have does a very good turn as the Mr. Handy unit. Voice wise, he does a great job.
they're very funny. Yes, very nice. Oh yeah, I look forward to hearing how that turns out for your party.
It's madness, and it was a random encounter as well, as is the best in Fallout and Skyrim and all those Bethesda titles. Some of the best stuff that can happen is when something just comes barreling out the undergrowth as you're going to your next quest line, and that's exactly the same here. Absolute madness.
Oh, brilliant. So I suppose my tale from the table, I will go and look back to, I want to say, I don't know if I've done this one on the show already. Have I talked about Odyssey of Theros? Odyssey of Dragonlords on here, a game. I realise I'm expecting you to remember something that I have said months ago, probably at this point, and also something that I'm not sure. But so this may be a repeat, so apologies if that is the case. But I have a party of 5. I think it was 5 for the first session. I think one of my friends dropped out following that, but there was a fighter called Brimaz who every single combat of the very first session of Odyssey of the Dragonlords died in every single, or went down in every single combat. And they were supposed to be playing the demigod. So what happened is that they went to, so initially you go to fight this giant boar that's terrorizing the land, that's been released by one of the titans. So Brimaz went down fighting that, tanking a load of damage. They then went to go and fight. Went to go and find the Oracle. So yes, that's right. They receive word that the Oracle has made a prophecy about them, and they need to go and find out what that is. So they get to the Oracle's temple. It's overrun by the Order of Sidon, which is the Titan that released the boar in the first place. And it appears that they're trying to kidnap the Oracle. So there's a fight with some of the Order of Sidon soldiers. Brimaz goes down in that fight as well. Before, obviously, because he's a demigod, he can't be killed. So he pops back up. And then they get down into the bowels of this Oracle's temple, and they find that she's been sort of imprisoned by a hag who's torturing her. He goes down against the hag for a third time in the session, just making a lot of decisions that put him at danger. But it did mean that everyone else survived, and he was brought back to life swiftly on each occasion that knocked him out. But yes, as anyone who's played the adventure knows, that each character gets like a backstory that's sort of set in ancient Greek legend. So we've got someone who's the doomed one, so they prophesized to die due to interference from one or both of the Titans / evil gods. We had someone who is a timeless one, who's lived out of time, and has I think is the daughter of it's a daughter of the Oracle, but it's like 100 years. They've been in stasis somewhere. So there's a lot of really cool backstories, and they get fame as they go through the adventure. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. But yes, poor Brimaz is every time they reach a new settlement now, he's now known as Brimaz the Undying. And he is expected to die in every single combat that they have.
That's bless. Having run that campaign, I know that it can be a little deadly early levels. There's a few encounters in that game that are tough and a tough ask, one of which you've definitely got coming up. And in fact, just as a sort of statement of how well organized and well put together my players are for Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, that boar fight. Did you run the boar fight as book? Did you run it as stats in the book?
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is just a testament to how tough it is to challenge my current group running Odyssey. Is I had to massively stat that boar up for them to fight it. But one of the tough fights you've got coming up, James, is easily the hardest encounter in the early chapters of that book. If you're worried about spoilers, I can tell you specifically what it is off air.
I think I might know because yes, they've got to the next city and they have. Oh, what did they do initially? Oh, they went straight off down south. They went to the temple to try and get the dragon horn. Found out that it was missing. Followed the tracks. And now they are just about. I left the last session with them just about to fight I can't remember what creature it is, but the woman in the ruins who's kidnapped all the children. Oh, she's a dryad.
She's a dryad, yeah.
They're just about to fight the dryad. But yes, I do know that there's some centaur combat that can go horribly wrong. Some bullets, and then potentially harpies if that goes well enough. And they decide to try and save the daughter / the sister of one of the players because they're related to the king. Yeah,
very cool. That's not none of those are the one I'm thinking of.
Oh dear God! No, tell me.
The one I'm thinking of involves the Mithril Mine.
Oh, okay.
And there is an enemy. There is an enemy at the bottom of that, which is horrifying, especially if the players don't level up a couple of times before they get down there. Get a look at its stat block and prepare yourself because it's a tough ask. I just talked about the fact I needed to level the boar up in order to challenge my players, but when they faced that enemy, they got kicked real hard, real hard, and I ran that enemy as book. So
I found all the encounters for it, especially in the early game, are quite difficult.
They are.
For the players, like combat wise. They're not easy, and if they haven't planned ahead, they're in trouble a lot of the time, which is very cool. I do enjoy that.
It's a challenging book because I'm pretty far through it now. Actually, we're a fair old way through it. In fact, we're not too far away. There's 2 titans that the players have to face, whether that be negotiating with them or killing them or however they want to approach dealing with them. There are 2 separate titans to deal with. They've dealt with one and are now at the sort of encounter location of the second. So they're a darn good way through the book. I've run quite a bit of it, and it doesn't let up. There is some really tough encounters, and there's some really high DC saving throws as well in some instances that can cause absolute havoc for the players. So it's a challenging book, but there are things directly related to the player's backstory, those wonderful backstories that it gets the players to create and buy into. There are boons that can help them with some of the challenge. That players might not necessarily be aware of, and it's worth talking to your players about that because they might be a bit frustrated if they keep getting their heads kicked in. It sounds like your poor fighter doing, but assuring them that there are systems in place just to make sure that, despite being quite deadly, they are epic level heroes in that story, and so there are ways in which they can deal with some of that stuff. Not all of it. It is very possible you can lose a character in this book easily, but some of it.
No, I think
very good book though.
It is really good. It's just dripping with theme, and it is very fun to run as a DM who likes Greek mythology. So I'm excited to see where that game goes. And hopefully I'll have some more Chult stories soon. Once I get them into the jungle, I can be like, well, this week 3 players died when drop bears attacked them, and I can't remember what the drop bear's name, but there are drop bears in Chult.
Yes, there are. I need to shout out real quickly since we're on Odyssey. I won't do a full tale on it, but my players, as I say, they're now at the location of the second Titan. But knowing that is near end game, at least for the main story. They've stopped off at Mitros, one of the major cities in the book, and have basically been offloading some of the crew they don't need from their ship and saying not goodbyes, but sort of just saying, we know what we're about to do, and tying up some loose role-playing ends with some characters. And there was a beautiful moment. It was a beautiful session all around. Everybody was absolutely on point, talking to their respective NPCs and dealing with their own backstories and each other. But one particular call-out was one of my players is running the demigod, but not the one from the book, because we already had one. So it was an alteration to the demigod, which put them in relation to one of the gods called Vulcan instead of one of the other ones. And they had a beautiful moment with Vulcan. Vulcan's kind of a god of the forge, and this particular character had struggled for years and years and years to forge something meaningful. And the last I actually talked about it on this podcast as one of my tales. They actually failed at the last major attempt to do it. The dice weren't with them, and it failed, but they ran with it. And it came to this session where the player was face to face with Vulcan, and Vulcan took a knee in front of them and basically said, I genuinely don't care if you forge some trinket or magic item, because you forged a legacy, and you forged a friendship, and you forged a fellowship. And that's more meaningful than anything you could forge out of, bronze or anything like that. And interrupting him, this player threw himself at Vulcan and threw his arms around him and gave him a hug, which was a very big show of display from a character that was otherwise quite introverted and monosyllabic a lot of the time. And it was tears all around the table. It was a wonderful moment. So shout out to you, Jamie, for that, because that was beautiful. And I think all of us loved that moment. It's dripping, like you say, dripping with theme, dripping with great encounters, and it's dripping with roleplay potential.
That's really cool. That's an awesome moment. I will, I'll hope to pull off something similarly emotional with the king and his son at some point, who at the moment is obviously a drunken wreck because of their their wife. My character's not my character, my player's character's mum being taken off by that green dragon. So I don't know how that plays out yet. I've not managed to read all the way through the book. I've been sort of reading a chapter or two or a little bit ahead of where I need to be as we go, because it's a big book. It's a huge book. Huge book.
I definitely would recommend try and read some of the back end stuff if you can, or some of those chapters which deal with some of those backstories, because there's some really nice things you can layer in early doors to pay off later on top of those things. Gushing about this book, it's a great book. It is, and I've got hold of the Raiders of the Serpent Sea, which is the Norse mythology.
Yes, I think you have mentioned version that before. Yeah, that sounds really cool as well.
I've been reading that, and I know that I've got a few players very interested in doing that too. So maybe. All right. I think that's probably going to about cover us for today, James. If you're good with that.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
Fun episode, a lot to talk about. It's going to be more and more. I'm sure once we get our grubby little mitts on this monster manual, we'll have more to say on that. And I look forward to hearing more about Odyssey, having run it. And I will keep plying you with absolute tomfoolery from Fallout.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to seeing how Mr. Hand does there. That's interesting. That's something you couldn't do in the video games, which is one of the best things about tabletop role-playing games, is you can do all this insane stuff that even the games couldn't let you do. So yes, looking forward to hearing about that.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you very much, James. Hopefully we'll both be back next week with at least JC for a three-piece going into the next session. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and we will catch you next week.
Catch you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.